the majority of limitations that most people face are mental. So even when it comes to strength workouts, a lot of it's mental. A friend of mine used to train as a personal trainer, and they'd come in and say, okay, what's like your max rep at bench press or squat? And he'd be talking to them while they're standing there and get them talking and engaged. And then he'd add like an extra 5 kilos or 10 kilos, depending on what the exercise was, and get them to do them like, yep, okay, I'm done. And then he'd get them off and they'd look, they'd done an extra 5 or 10 kilos. And like, hold on a sec, that's like past like my max best last time. And so what he would start to do is show them like, this is what you thought was the max, but your body's actually capable of more.
Some experts chase attention, but the smart ones build authority. You're listening to the Authority on Demand podcast, where credibility becomes your competitive advantage. Every week, we're pulling back the curtain on how founders and leaders turn expertise into inbound demand through books that position, media that converse, and strategies that actually move the needle. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, your host and Chief Creative Officer at Authority on Demand. Now, let's turn your authority into leverage.
So, they say trust is about character, loyalty, and giving people the benefit of the doubt. But according to today's podcast guest, that thinking is exactly why you keep getting burned. What if I told you that trust isn't about heart, it's about patterns? That the most dishonest people are actually more predictable than those who are honest only when it's convenient. Clay Moffat spent 15 years as a high performance coach discovering why smart people make the same trust mistakes over and over. He's built a 7-figure business, lost it all, and in 21 days, while potentially going blind, he decoded the neuroscience behind betrayal. So his book, The Trust Trap, is being used in $100 million companies because it treats trust just like it actually is, a skill you can master. So without further ado, Clay, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me, Danielle. It's a pleasure to be here.
Hey, real quick before we jump back in, if you're loving what we're doing here, hit that subscribe button and drop us a like. We're bringing you the best authors, the most real conversations, and all the writing wisdom that you didn't know you needed. So stick around because it only gets better from here. All right, now let's get back to the conversation.
Of course, I'm honored. I'm literally looking forward to this conversation. But before we dive into talking about the book, I think it's important that we touch a little bit upon your life and your experiences. So, first off, how did your experience as a Navy weapons technician shape your approach to human behavior, and how did that lead to inspiring the book?
So the approach to human behavior has been shaped ever since I was knee high, right? Our behavior starts getting shaped by childhood traumas, by the rewards we get from our parents, from schools, from society, etc. And I would say a large part of that came from, for lack of a better word, I think the best way to describe it would be almost, I don't want to use this word, but I'm going to use it, neglect. And that's not intentional. That's quite the opposite. So growing up, my dad, as many dads of children who were born in the 80s and 90s, had to work a lot, and he had to work insane hours. And these insane hours meant that he wasn't really around. And so I never really had that touch and base with him. And then when I did, he's also, as much as I love him to death and I wouldn't change him for anyone, he's undergone a lot of things in his life. And again, men from way back when were taught that you just swallow it and you don't process it and you don't do anything with it. And so I think that had a lot of ways that started to shape my behavior early on, which then caused a whole bunch of very inadequate coping mechanisms. And these coping mechanisms then pretty much left me as a victim, for lack of a better word. I didn't even know I was being a victim, but the way I was approaching life and the way I was approaching people and the way I was approaching relationships and results. And that only really became apparent when I was around about 27. And when I became 27 and a few things happened, most notably getting arrested in a foreign country and going to jail would be one. Yeah, we can talk about that if you want.
I am
Also,
very curious.
getting promoted, but then having the promotion removed because of something that didn't happen at work. It happened on the way to work when I was an engineer. and a few other things, the realization was everything led back to me. And so it became a self-fulfilling loop that I then had to dive in and start to decode. And then through doing so, I wasn't actually even getting started with trying to develop myself. I was going down a path of, okay, still complete victim mentality. You know what? This is everyone else. I need to figure out how to manipulate and persuade and influence all these other people so they do what they're going to do. So to circle back for a second, I think that was probably the most monumental screw up of my life. In the US, I was training as a subsea engineer, and what ended up happening was I had an issue with alcohol, a big issue with alcohol, and I went out and got drunk, and got drunk to the level that I don't remember anything. Blackout drunk. I think one of my friends labeled it "white girl wasted." That's what he said to me the other day. I'm like, all right, I don't know what that means, and I ended up getting arrested for breaking and entering. I was so drunk, I went to the wrong house. I thought it was my friend's house. I broke into this house. Um, and for
This is what
whatever reason,
happened.
well, for whatever reason, I broke in his house. Fortunately, the husband wasn't home. Fortunately, I would probably be dead because it was in Texas, so we're clear.
Mm.
Um, and what ended up happening was I had the sense or the good grace, I have no idea how at this point, just go sit outside and wait for the cops. So I didn't get arrested for running from the cops. I didn't get arrested. So they're like, okay, this is just some drunk idiot. And it ended up being that after a lot of time and a lot of money, the case got dismissed because the lawyer's like, okay, I don't want to press charges against him. He wasn't trying to like break in, he wasn't trying to steal anything, he was just a drunk idiot. But it was a wake-up call. And so my behavior started to shift around then because there was really no one else to blame for that. That was all me, that was all my patterning, that was everything about me. And so I started to really dive in and have a look. And that was around 2011. It's around about 14 years ago. And I had already been studying language and that for roughly about 2-3 years. And then everything started to shift and the catalyst started really at about that point in time. I'd say that was the major awakening and the epiphany that I needed to be able to start seeing the world in a different way, in a different place.
Well, you certainly have had a ton of different experiences, and I could see how they all have lended a hand into building what, you call the trust trap, and how you were able to, really formulate the ideas. And I mean, thank you for sharing that story about, being walking into the wrong house. That's crazy, but I'm glad that, you did have the good sense, and it ultimately became a life lesson. So, incredible stuff. But so let's transition a little bit into the writing process itself. You mentioned you only had 21 days to write the book while potentially going blind. I mean, what is going on with that? Can you tell us a little bit more? Why this timeline, and are you okay? Are you able to see?
Yeah. The timeline with 21 days was because I had 21 days until the surgery was going to happen on my right eye.
Interesting.
Since 2011, I've been blind in my left eye. I had one working surgery and two failed surgeries. So it was a failed surgery, then a working surgery restored my vision, and the next surgery took it away, and I haven't got it back since. That was in my left eye. The surgery that took away my vision was cataracts, which is a very standard surgery for a lot of people. In November last year, early December, I was on a road trip with my wife and son. We were driving up into the jungle to go away for a couple of days. And for whatever reason, it just happened to occur that the lines, the dividers on the road seemed to be splitting into two. And I was like, okay, this is strange. This doesn't make sense. Now, at the same time, I used to wear toric contact lenses, which if they weren't situated properly, like on the exact angle on my eye, they would kind of give the impression of something similar to that. So I thought it was just a problem with my contacts. Stayed up for the whole weekend, went and saw a whole bunch of animals, then came back and went to the optometrist, and my vision could not be corrected. I'm like, okay, there's something up. So then I went to ophthalmologist, et cetera, et cetera. It turned out after many months and many thousands of dollars that the issue was cataract again. And the last time I had that surgery, I went blind. So I was very, let's say, acutely aware that the surgery could send me blind in my other eye. So the 21-day timeline wasn't necessarily 100%. It was 100% real. Because had the surgery not gone well, then I really doubt we'd be having this conversation today. It'd be a very different story. Using phones would be challenging. Getting on calls and helping my clients would be challenging. It'd be a very different reality for me right now. Fortunately, as you can probably assume, the vision went well and the surgery went well. The timing was very intense. So I'm not sure if you remember. So my surgery was on, I'm going to mess up the date now. I believe it's the 23rd or 24th of March. And then the following day, I'd left. I had the appointment the following day, and then we left to drive back down to Phuket because of the air pressure. I didn't want to destabilize or cause any problems with my. So we left. And we drove down, and on the way down, Bangkok suffered a 7.2 magnitude earthquake. And the time that the earthquake hit was the time I was in for surgery. So had that earthquake happened 2 days before, I would have been in the middle of surgery in my only working eye and had to evacuate a surgery room. And I would have most likely been blind because I don't know how they're going to be able to compensate for an entire building shaking. So I was very fortunate. I was extremely fortunate. And that 21 days was real pressure. It was something that to me had to be done. I've been told by many people, oh, you could have hired a ghostwriter afterwards. Oh, you could have had some editor come through. I said, I could have had all those things done. To me, it was the only 100% chance that I was ever going to be able to have to write a book in the way that I wanted, design the cover that I liked, and go through the entire process by myself without having to trust that my description is going to produce the thing that I've got inside my head for someone else to do it. So that's why the 21-day deadline.
Wow. I feel like every time I ask you a question, it comes with these crazy stories like that. I mean, the earthquake and everything, but again, it seems like it all did work out in the end because you were able to meet that deadline. Now, a lot of people writing who are listening to this podcast today, and a lot of authors that I talk to on this podcast always mention how their book took them years. They weren't able to stick to it, the revision process, whatever it might be. What was your routine for making sure it did get done? There had to have been some tips and tricks that worked for you that maybe might work for some other people. Well, tell us a little bit about that.
So have you ever heard of Parkinson's law?
I can't say I do
Okay,
or
I
have.
bet you, I bet you have. I bet you have. You just
Perhaps.
maybe don't know it as Parkinson's law. So the general way of summarizing Parkinson's law is the time it takes to complete something is the time you associate or assign to it. So if you say it's going to take me 6 hours to clean my room, it's going to take you 6 hours to clean your room. Whereas you say, I've got 30 minutes to clean my room and then I have to be out, you'll clean your room in 30 minutes. Now, obviously, there are going to be some physical capabilities that are going to be inherent and put limitations on certain things. So if, for example, if you say it's going to take me 2 hours to climb to the top of Mount Everest, well, it doesn't matter how skilled you are, it's not going to take you 2 hours to climb to the top of Mount Everest. So there are some physical limitations with some things. However, the majority of limitations that most people face are mental. So even when it comes to strength workouts, a lot of it's mental. A friend of mine used to train as a personal trainer, and they'd come in and say, okay, what's like your max rep at bench press or squat or whatever it was? And he'd be talking to them while they're standing there and get them talking and engaged. And then he'd add like an extra 5 kilos or 10 kilos, depending on what the exercise was, and get them to do them like, yep, okay, I'm done. And then he'd get them off and they'd look, they'd done an extra 5 or 10 kilos. And like, hold on a sec, that's like past like my max best last time. And so what he would start to do is show them like, this is what you thought was the max, but your body's actually capable of more. And I think I'm no expert, so we're clear because I've written one book. But I think the whole idea is that people put these time limits that it should take me 12 months to write a really good book. It should take me 2 years to do all the research and to do this and do this. And so there's these limitations that people put in on themselves that in order to achieve this thing, I need to make it this and this and this. Born out of necessity though, right?
Yeah.
And
Yes, you
if
had
you
to
look
make it
at
done. You didn't have a choice.
exactly, I did not have a choice. And I think that's a very, very big difference, is that most people do have the choice on whether they write the book or not. So I didn't have the choice to let any insecurities in. I didn't have the choice to let any self-doubt creep in. I didn't have the choice, or let me rephrase, I didn't have the luxury of those. Those things are a luxury to people that have time. And I didn't. So even if they came in, I'd be like, okay, fantastic. Are we committed to doing this book or not? And so, like, okay, let's go to the book.
Yeah, well, I was going to say it's very wonderful and to think about that because some people again they're putting it off. They're saying, "No, I'll write tomorrow. I don't have time for it. I'm tired." But when you give yourself that deadline, it's out of necessity. You don't have a choice. Then it's going to get done. So that's kind of the mentality a lot of authors must need to get into. You know, it's now or never, even if it might not be in their situation. That perspective and that mindset makes all the difference, I would say. So.
The other thing is the time blocking, right? So with the now or never, there's some people they might not be in the same situation as me, but they could be in a similar situation. Let's say they're married with a couple of kids, or they're on sabbatical and they're about to start a new career path, and new career path is going to be quite intense, and they want to write the book before they start. So that means they've got that 3 months sabbatical, or they've spoken to their other half now. Like, look, you've got 3 months. I will look after the kids for the next 3 months. You've got that to write this book. After that, like we're back to the normal routine. I'm not going to do this, whether you're the lady and it's the man in the relationship that's writing, or vice versa. It doesn't matter. But you start setting up some conditions that are non-negotiable, that are not going to be extended, that have to be done and adhered to. And I think it also comes down to the behavior as well. So how often when you do something, do you keep your word? If you don't keep your word to yourself, say, okay, I've got this time, so this is what's going to happen. Can you actually go ahead and produce that? And if you can't go ahead and produce that, then the likelihood of you doing it under a false guide of urgency and necessity is going to be pretty slim as well.
Good. Yeah, that's definitely something I have to think about, the technique behind it, the time blocking and, putting different roles into different situations like that. And, I think that's, you just have to systemize it and find the right process and ultimately what works for you, but also, again, sticking to it. So incredible stuff. But, I'd love to touch a little bit more upon, the book itself and, everything behind it. So, you mentioned that this book does have no filter. So, how did you decide what to include versus what to hold back? And do you have any examples?
So no filter was more in reference to the tone and the language.
Understood.
I'm very
So,
conversational, and I would argue quite direct with the way they communicate with many people. And I will quite often say what I think. Now, what I think today is very different to what I used to think 10 years ago. So I can be more attuned with people and say what I think instead of upsetting and ruffling a lot of feathers and making people upset. And so I've learned to have some kind of mental tact inside my brain, and that now also comes through when I actually start to speak. Whereas before there used to be no filter, and I was also very self-critical, which meant I was critical of others. Whereas now I'm not so self-critical, which means I'm not so critical of others. So it comes from a place of more so compassion and acceptance than it does from judgment. And that was a big shift that I made. And so with that, what needed to be included was enough so that the book could stand on its own legs. So when I was deciding to write the book, I was deciding this is potentially the last thing that I get to create that people can then consume so that I can help them in their lives. So do I create a course? Do I create an online course? Do I create this? And I was like, okay, the only thing that I can create, and once it's done, does not need me for it to continue. Now, notwithstanding marketing or those kind of things, the only thing was a book. A course required that I had hosting, required video updates, required all these elements to stay relevant, whereas the book doesn't. The book's the book, is once it's done, it's written. Then I started breaking down, okay, what is the most useful thing that I could offer people? What is the one thing out of all my experience that would apply to the majority of people? And trust started to stick its head up because I started analyzing the majority of my coaching clients. And then I started analyzing most relationships. And trust is the foundation, or the lack of foundation for some people, for every single relationship that you have had, currently have, and will ever have. So to me, if I could present this way to show people a perspective where trust becomes something that's extremely useful versus something that can set you up for failure, and if I can express that in a book, then I've done that in the minimum amount of time possible with the maximum impact for the reader so they can take it away. So the decision of what to put in and what to leave out was made by a sense of pragmatism. Is this useful? Is this going to move them forward? Is this going to get them to the end goal? So the end goal of the book was to take a person on a journey so that you could read the book, have an experience, and see, okay, it's a different lens. It's not about me versus the world. It is about me attuning to myself. It's not even about you versus yourself. And some people have messaged me, oh, this is like about me versus myself and self-sabotage. I'm like, no, because it's not self-sabotage. I don't talk about self-sabotage. It's just a mechanism that's happened inside the brain that you need to start to understand. And when you understand it, you can stop getting caught out. And so that was the idea, to go through and take them on the journey from that point to get them to the journey to a space where the idea that you can trust everyone, every single person on the planet, didn't seem so impossible to digest.
Understood. Yeah, thank you so much for laying that out for us. I think the thing that resonated most with me, and I think to our listeners, along with everything and how important it is to trust, but also that you really thought about your audience and the audience you're speaking to, and really gearing it towards that. And I can see how that builds trust in the reader too, just because you are being so authentic and no filter and really just connecting with them. So amazing stuff there. I'm wondering if you'd like to touch a little bit on your research process. I mean, you weave neuroscience and psychology into your personal narrative. What was that process like for you, especially at such a tight deadline? I mean, the research itself.
The research, I was fortunate. So saying I wrote the book in 21 days is a bit of a lie if we're being direct with each other, because I've been studying this stuff for 15 years. So it's not like
Okay.
I just decided I'm going to go ahead and write this book. Let me research everything. Like there's an Austrian neuropsychologist by the name of Carl Pribram. He's now in the great beyond. But he was a heavy-hitting dude who I've known about for at least the last 8 years. And his research is pioneering on how the brain is shaped and how we start to. He was definitely one of the pioneers of like modern-day neuroscience. Daniel Kahneman's stuff I've read about in his book. Stephen Porges' stuff I've learned years ago when I was looking about nervous system regulation. Chase Hughes is one of my mentors I've known for 7 or 8 years. Like it wasn't necessarily like a research project that I was like, okay. And I think this actually became part of the reason why the book was shaped the way it was, because this was stuff that I already knew. The research was backed. It was solid. All the research that I've put in the book has been peer reviewed at some point and is validated and is recognized as, some of it very much cutting edge, some of it is extremely old, like 50, 60 years old, and still relevant today. So because of that, and because of the themes that the book was traveling through, the research for the book really was one of the simplest elements for the book, because it was along the lines of everything that I'd been studying and been training. And the book itself was a different lens or approach to how to view that research and leverage it into something practical for people. So the research then became, what is the most useful research that I can add in here so that people can see this isn't just my opinion? Because that would have been the ultimate mistake in my mind, to write this thing, which to me, when I look at the book and when I look at the whole frame of what the book sets about, is reality and is a very useful and pragmatic solution to how people get burned and burn themselves. But without that research, it's just, oh, look at me. It's an opinion piece. It's a waste of time. And additionally, there are billions of people that have no idea who I am. However, there are millions and millions who know who Carl Pribram is. There are millions and millions who know who Daniel Kahneman is. I mean, he's written best-selling books around the world. There are a lot of people who know who Stephen Porges is. So if I can connect the dots for them and show them how this is extremely relevant to groundbreaking research and show them a practical lens of how to take that research and utilize it, then I've done my job. And that was how the research was selected and the research was put together, to show people the practical way to use the insights from that research that has been validated, field tested, and leveraged.
You have a very good point with that. You really do need to have the correct research just to make everything you're saying credible. And you mentioned before, it could be an opinion piece, but you need to ground it in that research, of course, for any nonfiction book. It adds the credibility. It also validates what you're saying to the readers, and that way they can better, trust you, if we're going to circle it back to trust. So amazing stuff there. So moving forward from this, I'm wondering if you happen to have any other exciting projects or events on the horizon, anything that we could be looking forward to now that this first book is out. Have you considered, writing another one, maybe this time making it a 10-day challenge?
A 10-day challenge for a book, that would be something.
Hey.
I,
But
I
yeah, so
don't
anything on the horizon?
I don't know that I have anything right now. I have an idea for another book, which is more expansive than the Trust Trap. I think it will be very useful. At the same time, I want the Trust Trap to have the maximum impact. So I'm focusing on avenues to get it to as many people as possible and figuring out what's going to be the best way to do that and how am I going to actually allow that to happen and get that out there. And I had just put it on Amazon, purely Amazon. And I think that that might have been a mistake and that I might need to go down other paths to get it out there. But I also, at that point, didn't really have the time to go and think about what I was going to do. I had to go through the easiest course to get the simplest way to get it out there and published, so that it could be published before my surgery date, so that no matter what happened in surgery, I already had the book out, I had it there, and it was presented, and I was ready to go. So there was a lot. There was a lot that came out. But the next project will possibly be based around something in a similar lens to the Trust Trap, but much more expansive and more encompassing, and showing people a different lens on how to see themselves in the world.
Understood. Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that with us. And you do have a very good point. A lot of authors do put their books out there, and you made the right choice getting on Amazon so that people can, find it and read it and get into it. But we do need to nurture those books too and really promote them in order for them to gain traction. It's like, giving birth to a child. You need to continuously breathe love into it. So I can see you're doing that now, though. It's your mission. You're on podcasts, you're spreading it, and more and more people will learn about it. So really important stuff. I love it. So, that being said, then I'm wondering if people do want to get in touch, stay up to date with these new projects, and, perhaps even learn more from you. Is there any certain site that they could go check out and get connected?
So the best place to go is claymoffat.com, ClayMoffat. It's getting upgraded at the moment. So if you do want to stay in touch, the best place would be to go at claymoffat.com. And there is a bunch of resources that I've made for your listeners, which I will include a link for you, which is claymoffat.consulting/authors on mission. And I'll send you the link for that so they can download and access any of the resources that will help, the things that I used while writing the book that may help them. It may not, but I'll have them there so they can use them if they want to anyway.
My goodness, you heard it here, everybody. We get a special offer. I love that. I'll be on the lookout for that link. I think that that's going to be an amazing way for us to, you know, get connected and learn more and stay in touch with it and really immerse ourselves with their book too. A really good method also give everyone like a sneak peek. So thank you for that. And we'll be on the lookout. And everybody, we're going to put the links in the description box of this podcast today, so you can go ahead and, click on over. All this being said, though, I'm wondering if you happen to have a particular message you'd like to leave our listeners with today, perhaps any writing tips that truly helped you that we haven't touched upon yet. What do you have in mind? Anything in particular?
The only thing which we did kind of touch on,
Hmm.
that I think was the defining factor for me, was making the book a necessity, making it a non-negotiable. If you do not make something a non-negotiable, and if you do not set your environment up, and your environment means your physical environment as well as your mental environment, then you will not get the book done. When it
Understood.
comes to understanding that you need to go through this process and that your first draft is going to be a pile of trash, and then you're also still going to need an editor and maybe a developmental editor, maybe a line editor. I mean, I don't know, but you'll need those things. I managed to get the book out in a week, and then I'm very fortunate that I have a friend who is a very talented writer, and she also is a developer, and I sent it through to her. And her first feedback was, "This reads like a technical manual. You haven't put any stories in here, you've just put a ton of data. This is going to kill people. They're not going to be able to stick to it." And so I had to rewrite the entire book again with actual stories and depth and connecting with people and showing people like why you should listen to this person or how this is important, and went through this whole thing. And then we ended up producing a really good book. So I think if you can start with that in mind, that no matter what you write, the first draft is always going to suck, then you can kind of give yourself permission to just let it suck, but keep writing. Because the first draft is not going to be what you put out in the first place anyway. You're going to put out something different, and you're going to have help along the way. So just get out your own way, make a necessity, commit to the process, and recognize that that first draft is a first draft, and you're going to do it again.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So that's why you need to kind of, I guess, have that plan in place, have a team by your side, and don't be afraid to reach out to others either. I think a lot of authors out there, they think they can do it all on their own. It's good to get that second opinion, and good that you did too. So yeah, I appreciate you sharing that with us. It's been, a really insightful conversation. I think that we've learned a ton about the writing process and trust in general and your incredible story too. I mean, you've been through it all and you've learned from it all. So, yeah, I mean, I guess all we can say is that it proves that our greatest insights come from our most challenging moments. So thank you so much, Clay. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much for having me, Danielle. I appreciate it.
Of course, of course. And to our listeners today, whether you're facing your own 21-day deadline or just ready to trust more strategically, the patterns are there waiting for you to decode them. So click on the links, go to Clay's website, check it all out. And in the meantime, join us next time as we continue exploring how thought leaders transform their knowledge into books that create real impact. Until then, keep writing, keep leading, and remember, trust everyone, but verify everything. Have a great day, everybody.
That's a wrap on another episode of the Authority on Demand podcast. If today's conversation sparked something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Share this episode with a founder or a leader who's ready to stop being the best kept secret in their industry. If you want to turn your expertise into inbound demand, head to authorityondemand.com to see how we help clients go from unknown to in demand. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, and I'll catch you on the next one. Now, go build some authority.